What's going on, guys? New topic for Online Gaming. This one is a little spoilery for the following games. I'll also put a timestamp for you, just letting you know up front. But this one comes from Uncharted Evil. Topic: Are bosses nowadays done poorly or disappointing? After playing games like Shadow of Mordor, where I was expecting to have a great fight with the Black Hand at the end, ended up being a crappy QuickTime event. Also, The Evil Within and Tomb Raider, very easy final bosses, was quite disappointing. Hell, even the recent Order 1886, you had a fight that was almost the same exact fight you had earlier in the game, which wasn't that great. What happened to big boss fights at the end of games? Now, most of the time, but not all the time, it's very anticlimactic. This is a really good topic. The thing is I'll try and do this topic without being super spoilery. I mean, you know, when we do these topics, it's very easy to get my point across when I use certain examples in games and things like that. And this topic pretty much involves the ending of tons of video games. So again, I'll try and not use examples here, but it's a good topic because that's absolutely the case right now. There's a lot of games nowadays where they don't have big boss battles anymore, and if they do sort of have a situation where like it's a boss battle, quote unquote, it's very anticlimactic. It's not really that big. It's you know, it is reduced down to something simple like a quick time event or a melee fight, or, you know, one little situation where you press a button and then a big scene plays out or something. You know, what's going on there? Why is that more of a commonplace thing? And immediately I look at this and I go, well, that's because of modern video games. Modern video games nowadays are big storytelling set pieces that, and it also goes oftentimes into what the game is in terms of its lore, you know what I'm saying? So, for example, games like Uncharted, that's like real human sort of thing, so it's kind of difficult to have a major boss fight. Now, of course, if you know the ending of Uncharted, you know that sometimes it has a slightly little interesting twist at the end of it that, you know, some might argue you could have a major boss fight, and there's certain, you know, the ending of certain Uncharted games, there is kind of like a boss fight, but if you've played them, then you kind of see what I'm getting at. They're not major big boss battles. I mean, major big boss battles, the ones that we're kind of all thinking of in the back of our minds right now, is the ones that we would always play on classic, not classic, but, you know, older video games, or, you know, early as back as on SNES, Sega Genesis, N64, PlayStation 2, Xbox. You know, a lot of those games, it was a really big, cool thing to have these awesome, epic boss battles. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of those games were designed to have a good, epic boss battle in a sense. Like the lore of those games gave like built a world basically where it made sense to have a big giant boss battle. Like, look at one of my favorite games, Jak and Daxter, the Jak and Daxter franchise. Jak and Daxter 1 had a lot of big epic boss battles because that world was kind of built with big giant monsters and stuff, you know what I'm saying? So you always had good situations, and of course it's a platformer too, a platforming game that really helps, where you had these big sort of epic set piece boss battles. You know, Mega Man game that has that lore perfectly set up right there with all those big boss battles. The game is pretty much built around that idea. Mario games, great platformer, totally set up again with like the world of Mario, and what, you know, we all know that game is set up well for like big boss battles. A game like The Order, for example, or Uncharted, or, you know, any other game you can think of, like Tomb Raider, again, those games are kind of, in a sense, and again, you got to keep in mind, modern times, they're being a little bit more realistic in a sense. There's not some crazy twist to it where there's big humanoid monsters or non-humanoid monsters, things like that. You know, that's essentially it. I mean, and again, it goes to the storytelling aspect. Because these games are trying to tell stories, the big payoff isn't necessarily boss battles anymore. The big payoff is a story element. And the thing is, at least with me, I'm okay with that as long as it actually is a good payoff. A lot of the times when I do finish these games, like the end of Infamous games or the end of Uncharted games, the big payoff for me was like just that insane story element that really hooked me there. Like, that's my climax. That isn't anticlimactic for me because I'm not upset that I didn't have some awesome major boss battle. I'm glad that I had some big story arc that ultimately had a satisfying, or maybe it was unsatisfying, but it was unsatisfying in the respect that you didn't agree with it or something like that. That's a completely different topic in terms of like actual storytelling in games, right? But that's why there's not big boss battles anymore. Boss battles are suited for, you know, excuse me, boss battles are suited for a certain type of game. That's just sort of the reality of it. And when you kind of shoehorn a boss battle into a game that's not really designed for it, that's what makes it kind of not really, it just doesn't really fit. I mean, One game I can think of is like the ending of Bioshock 1. Again, not gonna like spoil it or anything, but if you play the ending of Bioshock 1, you know that that game gets a lot of criticism for its boss battle because it just kind of is weird and oddly placed, and it just doesn't really make sense. It was more of a story-driven game, and you wanted maybe a certain impact instead of the final fight in that game. Man, it's really hard to do this without using actual specific examples and explaining it. But I can't do that. I love stories and games too much to spoil anything. Even if I do put up a bunch of templates or something like that, I want you guys to experience it if you have not played any of the games I've mentioned and things like that. But you see the idea, right? Certain games are just better suited for the actual thing. And when there's sort of crossover there where a game doesn't need a boss fight but it gets one, a lot of times it really just doesn't work out. And maybe sometimes when a platformer tries to do a situation where it doesn't have a big boss battle, then you're really upset because it didn't have one and you were expecting one. There needs to be a sort of balance there in that situation. It's one of the many things that a developer, it's just a design hurdle. You know what I'm saying? Certain games do it well, certain games don't do it right, and that's ultimately where this topic is derived from. So, and I guess what you're saying, Uncharted Evil, is that you feel that it's certainly disappointing. For me, I'm not finding many of them disappointing because that is what I'm expecting. When I play a lot of these like modern games that are telling stories, I'm not expecting a boss fight at all. I'm expecting the ending to wow me in terms of whatever it is that the game is really sort of leading me into. If it is leading me into a boss fight, I'm going to expect it. If it's leading me into a huge story arc where I'm supposed to be shocked and awed or something like that, that's what I'm going to expect. And when I do or don't get something like that, that's when I ultimately start judging the game in a more critical analysis. Anyway, Uncharted Evil, thank you so much for that topic. It was a really, really good one. If you have a topic for Run on Gaming, I submit you. I was going to say I submit you. I'm not submitting you. I'm going to tell you guys to submit them to me. Write them up in the comments, and I will screen cap it and do your topic at some point if I think it's really good. If it's really good, I'll probably do it. I keep coughing. I'm actually dying right now. Actually, we're all dying. To be a little morbid, we're all dying. Just very, very, very slowly. I have a good 60 so years on this planet left, probably. That is assuming my death is not premature. And that is also my extremely rough estimate of how long I have left. And now this show has taken a really dark turn. I think it's best we end it now, because we were talking about video games, and now it's dark.